Hello, I'm John Schneider. As a kid, I'd come to the New Jersey Bayshore to visit my Grandma Vi and take home movies of what I saw. Today I live here, produce video documentaries, and recently shot this boat at night with my video camera. Where is the Jersey Bayshore? Well, let's start with the big picture. It's somewhere in here, part of the universe, and it's definitely part of our world. But it's like no place I've ever experienced. And as soon as we land, I'll show you around. Hello everybody, this is John Schneider. I'm your host for Jersey Bayshore Country, and this is my aquarium, where during the last few years, fish have unfortunately come and gone. Some disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and some, unfortunately, just succumbed to some dreaded malady like ick. And what I've learned about trying to keep these creatures alive is that the environment they live in requires some attention. Just the right temperature, the appropriate level of pH, oxygen, plants, and most importantly, water that is unpolluted. Water that is clean, clear, and livable for aquatic creatures just like these. This episode of Jersey Bayshore Country is not about my aquarium, but about something much bigger. It's about Raritan Bay, which is an important resource for food, pleasure, and commerce. We've fished in it, played in it, and sailed over its surface to move goods for centuries. We've also remodeled it, so to speak, by building homes, factories, and roads along its shoreline. Over time, we began using pesticides to control mosquitoes. We drained the wetlands to create more space to build homes. We dumped sewage into rivers, and we sunk ships where they floated when we no longer needed them. All of this, as you might imagine, increased the toxicity of our beautiful Raritan Bay. Today, however, it's a very different story. Pollution is still an extremely important issue, but we're doing a much better job of controlling pollution than we did in the past, thanks to organizations like the New Jersey Baykeeper. And we'll talk about that organization and talk to the organization's executive director during this program. But let's get back to my aquarium for a moment. About once a month, I put a little fresh water into the tank. Usually, I let the water stand for a few days first to purge it of any chlorine. The Raritan Bay, however, gets filled every day with water and other less desirable fluids and particulates. Basically, 5 major rivers flow into Raritan Bay. They are the Navesink and Shrewsbury rivers, which are in the southeastern section of the bay near Sandy Hook. Then there's the Raritan River, which flows from the southeast section of the bay. There's the Hudson River, which makes its long journey from New York State and then passes alongside Manhattan and eventually empties into Raritan Bay. And last but not least, there's Arthur Kill, which is a little more complicated than the other rivers and is actually the subject of this episode of Jersey Bayshore Country. I suppose there's a 6th source of water as well, which helps to fill the bay when the tide rises. It's the Atlantic Ocean. It's also the source of all the large passenger ships and freighters entering the bay to deliver whatever it is we need. The large freighters and tankers which make their way into Raritan Bay from the Atlantic Ocean go one of 2 ways. For the most part, the freighters, which carry goods and products in those large stackable containers, take the Ambrose Channel to the port area of New York City. The tankers, which carry oil, petroleum, and diesel fuel, for example, head directly west toward Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and then turn right and go north into the Arthur Kill. And sometimes they're ships, but sometimes they're just very large barges pushed or pulled by a very powerful tugboat. In this episode, we're going to hitch a ride out of Keyport, New Jersey with the New Jersey Baykeeper and take a look at what's in and along Arthur Kill, the place where the tankers generally go. Debbie Manns is the Baykeeper and executive director of the New Jersey Baykeeper. and Sandra Miola is the organization's communications director. Joining me as their guest is Harold Meyer, who's doing research for a dramatic play he's writing. Our captain is Steve Delaney, who works for Baykeeper. Before we left, however, I asked Debbie about her organization.
My name's Debbie Manns, and I'm the Baykeeper and Executive Director of New York, New Jersey Baykeeper. And I've been the Executive Director for just over 6 years now. Before that, I worked in the governor's office on environmental and energy policy, and then before that, I was actually at Baykeeper doing policy work for a few years. And we are working on clean water in the Hudson Raritan Estuary, which includes New York, New Jersey Harbor, and the bays and rivers that flow into it.
And how are we doing?
We're doing a lot better than we used to. We still have a ways to go. People are now fishing and swimming. We'd love to see it where people could do more shell fishing in the Raritan Bay without having to go through depuration. But we're doing a lot better than we were. What
is the biggest polluter of all the rivers? That I know there's different types of pollution, but what's the biggest polluter?
Well, more in northern New Jersey, it's combined sewers, which come out of pipes. But down here in Raritan Bay, and Raritan River, it's a lot more the non-point source pollution, which is essentially runoff from the land, especially lawns with fertilizers. There's a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen that gets into the bay, and when people see an algae bloom, in the summer, or brown water, that's because of all the nutrients that are coming into the bay.
And where are we going today? What are we going to be looking at?
We're just looking at how the waterfront's doing, how the water's doing. We're seeing if there's any potential pollution violations, and it gives us, we know what the waterfront and what the water should look like, so we're looking for anything unusual. What are the species of animals here that are in danger? Well, we do think that we call the oyster, and we will go by oyster beds light, which used to mark the great beds of oysters in western Raritan Bay. They are functionally extinct in the bay and the harbor, which means they don't have a sustaining population. So that's why we have decided to use that as our restoration species. But we have a lot of ribbed mussels, a ton of fish. There's still a lot of charter fishing boats that come in and out of here, crabs. So it's healthy, but we can do better. Are
you working with the industries that are somewhat responsible for some of the pollution in the Raritan Bay? And how cooperative are they?
Well, it depends on the company. In a lot of ways, there's a legacy contamination in Raritan Bay and Raritan River, so that means it's been there a long time. The companies are often gone, the jobs that they provided are gone, but the pollution that they created is left. And you can think about National Lead, the Superfund site because of them. We have another heavily contaminated area because of them. And then I think you need to think about broadly more of us as people who live here and the pollution that we're contributing and what we can do in our own individual daily lives to.
What are the components of pollution that you typically measure here? Just generally speaking.
Well, we are doing some water quality sampling this summer, and we are looking at pathogen levels, which is also related to raw sewage or bacteria that's in the water. But we'll look at salinity and dissolved oxygen because that's also an indicator of the health of the bay.
How long have you been measuring the health of the bay?
Well, for the oyster program, we've been doing it, for over a decade, but we've really started to do more water quality sampling only this year.
Is there enough information to tell whether it's getting better, getting worse, or staying the same?
Yeah, you can definitely see the broad trends over time, but what we'd like to see is more sampling done on a routine basis, especially on the bayshore beaches, so that when people know when they're going to swim in the summer, that it's safe for them to swim.
So thanks to Debbie and her team, we're on board the Baykeeper patrol boat in Keyport and heading for Arthur Kill to see what there is to see. It takes about 30 minutes to get to Arthur Kill, which has been home to some of the largest petroleum importing, refining, and storage facilities on Earth. As a consequence, the Kill has experienced a number of both major and minor oil spills in its past. Over there on our right is the Keyport boat ramp, and straight ahead is a whole bunch of moored sailboats. The kill also runs past the second largest landfill on Earth, which sometimes leaches chemicals, which disturb the health of plankton, shellfish, and other invertebrates, as well as the fish, birds, and other wildlife that they support. And way over there, to the northeast of Keyport, is New York City, along with the Hudson River and New York Harbor. As we enter the main shipping channel, there's an interesting historical anecdote, a true story actually, that I want to tell you about. It's the lost Guggenheim treasure. You want to hear it? Of course you do. It was a still moonlit night, as they say, in 1903 when a tugboat pulled a barge out of what is today called South Street Seaport in New York City and led it to Raritan Bay. The barge, loaded with nearly 8,000 bars of silver and lead, was going to Perth Amboy to melt the bars, but they never arrived. Somewhere in this area, the barge tipped and sent most of the silver bars to the bottom. A salvage effort recovered about 85% of the bars, but that still leaves bars on the bottom, which today could be worth some $20 million. Good luck in finding those bars. As we make our way to Arthur Kill, there's a dredging operation which helps to maintain a 35-foot depth for the shipping channel, which we're now entering. Over there to our left is the historic Great Beds Lighthouse, built in 1878, and which at one time protected ships from a dangerous submerged obstacle, a tremendous bed of oysters, which today unfortunately no longer exist, because the oysters in the bay are virtually extinct. Thanks to the New York-New Jersey Baykeeper, however, programs are underway to bring the oysters back, and some of them are coming back. Okay, according to our onboard GPS, we're now entering Arthur Kill, which is Dutch actually for back channel. Perth Amboy is to our left, and the southwest end of Staten Island is to our right. And way over there behind us is the Garden State Parkway going over the Raritan River on its way to the Jersey Shore. Over there on the southwestern edge of Staten Island is a very historic house. It's the Conference House, built in 1680, and it was the site, actually, of a peace conference in 1776, which attempted to end the Revolutionary War before it even started. Edward Rutledge, John Adams, Lord Howe, and Benjamin Franklin were just some of the folks who attended this conference, but unfortunately they could not see eye to eye, and so the Revolutionary War began. Across Arthur Kill on the New Jersey side is an old abandoned ferry station that took cars and passengers to Staten Island and back again. The Perth Amboy ferry slip began offering ferry service as early as 1684. It finally closed down because bridges provided quicker and easier access across the Kill. But this particular building was restored in 1998 to what it looked like in 1904. In fact, a replica of the ticket office serves as a small museum. By the way, I didn't know, and maybe you did, that Perth Amboy served as the capital of New Jersey from 1686 until 1776. That's a long time. As you can see, there's some very beautiful homes on the western shores of Staten Island, as well as the New Jersey side. Well, and now we're starting to see some of the places where the tankers unload their liquid cargo and where it's stored temporarily before moving on to be processed or sold. Here's the Outer Bridge crossing, which connects New Jersey to Staten Island. Here's a barge that a tugboat pushed or pulled through Raritan Bay all the way to this spot. We'll see quite a few of these tugs on our trip. Okay, some things you should know about the Outer Bridge crossing, which incidentally is a cantilever-type bridge for you bridge aficionados. The Outer Bridge crossing is one of 3 bridges connecting New Jersey with Staten Island. The other 2 are the Bayonne Bridge and the Goethals Bridge in Elizabeth. And here's something which I think is funny. The Outer Bridge crossing was named for Eugenius Harvey, and are you ready for the last name? It's Outerbridge. His name is actually Eugenius Harvey Outerbridge. He was the first chairman of then Port of New York Authority and a resident of Staten Island. Isn't that funny? Anyway, let's keep going. Okay, this unusual ship docked here in Edison, New Jersey is called the New Jersey Responder. It's a 210-foot-long ocean-going tug which can contain oil spills and tow distressed tankers. It even has a helicopter landing pad on the rear deck. It's owned and operated by the Marine Spill Response Corporation. And here's where we start seeing lots of derelict and submerged objects along the river. And just to orient you once again, we're looking at the New Jersey side of Arthur Kill right now. And here's one of those tugboats I told you about. They are everywhere. And if you don't already know, a tugboat is referred to as the workhorse of the waterways. The tugs generally move vessels that either should not move themselves, such as ships in a crowded harbor or a narrow channel, or cannot move by themselves, like barges, disabled ships, or oil platforms. River tugs are also sometimes called towboats or push boats, but rarely do these tugs operate in the open ocean. This is the PSE&G steam generating station in Sewaren, New Jersey, or basically Woodbridge. It's a 582 megawatt station located on 152 acres, and it consists of 5 steam generators and a combustion turbine. As we make a turn in the Kill, here are 2 very old things keeping each other company. The McMyler coal unloader on the right, and the Major General William H. Hart Ferry on the left, both in Port Reading, New Jersey. This old coal unloader, also known as Big Mac, was once an important asset to the operations of New York Harbor because it could turn a 72-ton rail car full of coal completely upside down and dump the contents onto a barge. Isn't that amazing? Big Mac could unload a rail car every 2.5 minutes onto barges destined for New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, etc. This unloader was built in 1917, and it was operated by a crew of 12 people, and in fact, it's the last of its kind left in our area. And although efforts were made to recognize its historical significance, the cost and effort it would take to restore it was just too high. Next to the Big Mac is the Major General William H. Hart Ferry, which was built in Staten Island in 1925. It's one of actually 16 ferries constructed to operate on various crossings in our area. And across the Kill, from these 2 relics, is something I think is extremely interesting. It's one of the biggest boat graveyards in the country, and we're only seeing a small part of it from here. Since the 1930s, this was the site of Witt's Marine Equipment Company, which would salvage and resell materials from wrecked vessels of the New York and New Jersey waterways. However, the eccentric owner at the time refused to dismantle the majority of the ships that came to rest in his yard, and eventually he collected more than 400 historic vessels. And as the ships slowly decomposed, the area became a bit of a mecca for artists and photographers. Today, the property is controlled by the Donjon Marine Company, which seems to be taking a more proactive approach to actually salvaging materials from the wrecks. And just when you think that Arthur Kill can't get any more interesting, there's this: Fresh Kill's landfill, which was used in 2001 as the site where debris from the World Trade Center tragedy was separated into 2 piles: evidence and waste. The grim reality of this landfill is that some of the victims of 9/11, or sadly parts of them, may have ended up here. Ironically, today, Fresh Kills is in the process of being redeveloped into a recreational area, and the planners envision a monument to the victims of 9/11 at the highest point of the memorial park. With more than 2 acres of land, Fresh Kills Park will be almost 3 times the size of Central Park, and the largest park developed in New York City in more than 100 years. And there in the distance is the Freedom Tower, standing tall in New York City where the Twin Towers used to be. Moving on and looking toward the New Jersey side of Arthur Kill is a pile of dirt, which local authorities have been trying to get the owner to remove for years, but without success. Close up, it kind of looks like something from the Wild West, doesn't it? And here's something interesting. The owner of this crane extended it for routine maintenance one day, and while it was up in the air, an osprey family moved in at the highest point, and now legally it's got to stay this way until the family leaves. Good for the ospreys, and what a view this family must have. Speaking of birds, here's one in flight, although it's always a little challenging to keep them centered in my viewfinder. We're on the Staten Island side again. Here's the Con Edison Arthur Kill Power Generating Station. And back on the New Jersey side, I have no idea what this windowless building is or what's inside. Maybe Jimmy Hoffa? But I do know this is another tugboat. And here's a tanker. And yet another tugboat that's about to make waves. So hold on, here we go. That was fun. And now we're up around Linden, New Jersey, and here's a better shot of that tanker we just saw. It's called the Leopard Star, and it's registered out of Singapore, and it carries oil and other chemicals in its tank. Good gosh, I hope they're not putting anything into this old storage tank. And look, there's the Freedom Tower again, off in the distance. And look here, it looks like another landfill, but I'm just not sure. Here's a plane headed to one of the airports in the area. Like birds, they're also hard to videotape. Here's the PSE&G power generating station in Linden, New Jersey. And up ahead is the Goethals Bridge, which connects Elizabeth, New Jersey to Staten Island. The main purpose of the Goethals Bridge was to create an easy way to travel between New York City and Newark Airport. Its construction led to the replacement of 3 ferries, and both the Goethals Bridge and the Outer Bridge Crossing Bridge were built in 1928 and both utilized the cantilever design. Here's a little demolition in progress along Arthur Kill. And now we're going under the Goethals Bridge. And yes, here's yet another tug. And next to the Goethals Bridge is another landmark structure. It's the Arthur Kill Vertical Lift Railroad Bridge, built in 1959 by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. It has the longest lift span of any vertical lift bridge in the world, with dual 215-foot towers and a 558-foot truss span. Pretty impressive, eh? And this, my friends, is as far as we go today, even though the Arthur Kill goes much further. Let's turn around, head back to the home port of Keyport, New Jersey, and on our way back, we'll see even more tugboats pushing barges up the river. We'll even see a tanker. Speaking of tankers, here's a boat from Denmark, and the crew was very friendly, even smiled and waved at one point. I think they probably knew that I have some Danish in my blood. And there's Atlantic Highlands and Highlands way off in the distance. We're coming back into Raritan Bay with Staten Island on our left. And here's another tugboat about to move another barge up the Arthur Kill. And remember that dredging operation we saw on our way? Well, it looks like one of those claw machines in the arcade, doesn't it? Well, we're back in the harbor of Keyport. Incidentally, there's the Olson Boat Works, which was quite active building boats since the 1920s. During the late 1930s and 1940s, they built patrol boats for the United States Navy during the World War. Look at this bird standing on a stick in the water. And here is Peterson and Sons, which began building in 1934. They built commercial and luxury Jersey sea skiffs. They no longer built boats, but they did build the boat we're riding on. Today they're a full-service marina, and that's where we're docking. Well, here are some final comments from Baykeeper Debbie Mans.
We have great volunteer opportunities for cleanups along the Bay Shore, working in our oyster program, especially in New York, and doing volunteer and stewardship projects at the local parks. And we're funded primarily through private foundations and individual donors and members. And the more members we have, the stronger we are, and the more voices we can say that we're fighting for.
Are the beaches here, generally speaking, safe for people to come down and swim in during the summer?
Yeah, generally they are. We always caution in any of the Bayshore and harbor beaches that it's generally safe to swim, with the exception of after a rainstorm because of the combined sewers in the area. So we suggest 48 hours after a rainstorm, you do not go into some of the more northern beaches in the harbor and the Raritan Bay. Folks should always go to njbeaches.org, I believe is the website, to check on beach conditions, and then they can know for themselves. There's been a lot of beach replenishment this summer post Hurricane Sandy. Some beaches have been closed, and they're starting to reopen again.
Are there any oysters in this bay at all?
There are. We do have folks reporting in that there's pockets of oysters that they know about, and of course we have 11 acres that are permitted for oyster restoration at Earl. So that's a 5-year permit, and we'll be working to jumpstart that population. All our work comes back to water quality. We're a water-based organization like all water keepers, and so everything we do circles back, whether it's oyster restoration that improves water quality, preserving land that's adjacent to waterways that'll help slow development and improve the green infrastructure along the coastways, and then our advocacy and litigation is all around water quality.
Well, we're back inside my aquarium where we'll end another episode of Jersey Bayshore Country. I hope you appreciate everything here in the Jersey Bayshore, especially the incredibly large and beautiful resource called Raritan Bay. It really is worth protecting so future generations enjoy it just as we have and our ancestors have for hundreds of years. We'll see you next time with a brand new episode of Jersey Bayshore Country. I'm John Schneider. Bye-bye for now, everybody.